but we're just speaking different languages. That's it. We come from different planes of time in history, but the tenets themselves are so interconnected and so similar that we just need to come together, and once we have a better understanding of each other and what those tenets are, we realize we're on the same page.
I'm with it. I'm with it. Do you know Rainn Wilson?
Personally, yeah.
Do you have his? Can we get his mobile number after this interview? I wish I had a monitor.
Yeah, I know. It's a check. Take a look quickly.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Sure.
It's such a pleasure. I'm so fascinated about the Baha'i faith. And let me just start with this. If you had to contextualize Baha'i and world faith in relationship, say, to like Islam and Christianity, how would you see them situated in relation there?
So the Baha'i faith is, we consider it as the next in line of many different faiths of God. It's part of the Abrahamic cycle. The founder of the Baha'i faith had lineage dating back to Zoroaster and that of Jesus and Abraham. The Baha'is believe in something called progressive revelation, so that all the books of God have come down as different chapters at a different point in time, when the social structures of that time were ready for social teachings, but also as universal laws. And so Baha'is believe that in this day and age, we believe that the messenger of God for this day and age was someone named Baha'u'llah during the late 1800s. Early, 1844.
To be exact.
To be exact. And so we don't differentiate ourselves from a lot of world faiths. The faith of the Baha'is is the youngest independent world faith. And he's brought teachings that are universal, just as Jesus brought, just as Muhammad brought, just as Abraham brought, Buddha. But there's also social structures and social teachings for the time that we live in now. A very modern world, very different and apparent from the world that they lived in, of course.
And Baha'u'llah is seen as a messianic character in some sense, that he's fulfilling the prophecies that predicted his coming?
Yeah. In the Baha'i faith, there's actually twin manifestations. There was a gentleman both in title as the Bab, which means the gate in Arabic, and Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God. And the Bab came at a very low point in human history, where some of the social structures were starting to tear at each other again, as such happens with most civilizations. They reach a high point, and then there's a low point again, like a spring and winter, like a fall. And so he came bearing a message that someone greater than him would arise to herald in a new era of human maturity. And he himself proclaimed to be the fulfillment of a lot of prophecies relating back to Jesus, relating back to Moses, Muhammad. I myself am still learning a lot of those, and I don't have them to memory, unfortunately. But the connection is very intertwined with the rest of history as well, because at the start of this era, a lot of things were starting to click within the technology of the world, the philosophies of the world, social standards of the world. For example, like gender equality was starting to really pick up at that point in history. We have someone in the faith as a historical figure named Tahireh, who, incredible, she just took off her I forget what it's called.
Her hijab.
In front of men, because she agreed with the teachings of the time of the Bab, and said if we're actually living up to the standard, we have to be the examples of it. We have to herald in the age physically and rightly at that time.
I'm sure that was welcomed very well.
Right, yeah, exactly. You can guess what would happen at that time. And of course, a lot of people lost sight of that goal, and a lot of people said, yeah, that makes sense. It starts now. Yeah.
How, this is something which I'm curious about. You mentioned that you're studying Baha'i, which makes sense. You're studying the faith.
Not studying, but every person is doing their own sort of study and deepening, not in just Baha'i, but like in most world religions. I myself have gone through studying the Quran and the Bible and Sufi poets as well. So I think it's a continuous process of learning. That every single human being is on a process of learning, on a path of learning. So I don't think it ever really stops. But
that's fascinating. Is that something common within the Baha'i community, that you'll be studying the literature of other traditions?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to acquaint themselves with how the Baha'i legacy, if I can say, fits into the puzzle. Not that it's replacing anything, but that it's adding on. Because none of the past religions actually, the prophets themselves never came and said, we're erasing the past one, be gone. But they said, okay, now Muhammad taught about Jesus. He said Mother Mary and all this history, and then brought new teachings, a brotherhood for their time. The same thing with Baha'u'llah. He lived in an Arabic state. He followed customs and traditions of the time, and he urged followers to do their own deepening. He didn't say, I'm here and you're now cleansed of all your sins. At the time when people were looking for the next manifestation of God, they were looking for the Bab, the Messiah to come, the 12th Imam, as I was foretold. A lot of people thought some righteous people, if they claimed to be such, they would just follow them. And several of these believers said, that's preposterous. I'm definitely not that person. I am but a drop in an ocean.
Yeah.
And so they encouraged others to enhance their fervor in deepening themselves in prayer and devotions, and then look for themselves for the next one to come. And some of them found them. And in Baha'i history, they're regarded as 18 letters of the living. And a lot of people just were forgotten in history. They just never appeared.
These were like the 18 original students, the 18 apostles in some sense?
In a sense, yeah.
Were they lived contemporaneous to one another?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I'm in talking about coming to the faith and discovering Baha'i in this process of self-discovery.
Sure.
How did you personally, if you'd like to share personally, how did you come to be a
Baha'i?
A Baha'i, yeah.
So I'm actually a second generation Baha'i. My parents actually discovered the faith, and I was brought up going to children's classes, going to devotionals. In children's classes, like any religious class, you would probably just learn about the history,
Sure.
read some quotes, and deepen on an understanding of that. What does it mean to have virtues? What is a right and up conduct? Chastity, certain concepts like that, and you deepen yourself. And I guess every youth, even my friends, I've seen them fall in and out of the faith, but that I think is based on their own merit, of their own deepening themselves, of how much effort that they do put into actually learning about their own religion. Some took ownership of that, and how much their parents were involved. Because ultimately, the point of marriage is to bring up a child who is good and kindly and a radiant heart that serves humanity to its best potential, right?
Well said.
Yeah. And so for myself, I made a connection around the age of 15. We believe that the age of 15, the Baha'i faith, is considered an age of maturity for the soul, for the child themselves. They can usually make up their own decisions, and rightly so. At the junior youth age, you're starting to come up with your own ideas of identity, and you're very susceptible to outward influences as well. So that can be a good thing and a negative thing in contrast, right?
Yeah.
So in the Baha'i faith, we also have programs like the Youth Empowerment Program, which allows not just adults, but other youth to accompany children and just be there to be their best friend, basically. And just, if you have questions, if you want to talk about school or anything like that, and then just kind of keep the mindset not on just play and have fun, but having enriched conversations, right? So uplifting the sense of what does it mean to be a social action player in the world? Because eventually you'll grow up and you'll be a part of society, right? Yeah. So in that sense, I took ownership of my faith. I'm a storyteller at heart, going to school for filmmaking and all that. So I just connected with the history, and I connected with the storytelling aspect, the way that it was intertwined with the rest of the religions of the world. It just made sense to me.
Did you grow up within a Baha'i community, or was your family just isolated amongst?
Definitely in a Baha'i community. There's Baha'i communities actually all around the world. In Austin, Texas is a lovely Baha'i community. Still quite young, but when I was a child, and the Baha'i community was still learning. But there was a lot more people then when I was younger than it is now. Maybe it's because a lot of people moved out of the state or something like that, but yeah.
So you had like a network or a social support?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to.
Sure.
But how did you go from where you were in Austin, Texas, to being here in Haifa, which is what I understand to be the spiritual headquarters of Baha'i International?
Sure. Wonder how much I can say about that.
Yeah, feel free to.
Most of this kind of stuff you can probably find online as well. So I'm
curious
share.
Good.
As a certain age, children, they feel like they want to give back to the community, and so it's become sort of a cultural thing in the Baha'i faith, not based on any sort of writings or any obedience or anything like that, to give back to the community in some sort of way. And we call it just giving a year's service. It can be shorter, it can be longer. Some people just do it in their backyard if they want to, But it's the atmosphere that you take the time during this year or during this time of service to reflect, meditate, to try and find a sense of personal, internal reflection as you try and find your place in the world, right? You're distancing yourself from the day-to-day jobs and the day-to-day craziness of the world, and you're trying to find purpose in life. A lot of people will come to the Baha'i World Center here in Israel because indeed this is the heart of the Baha'i faith. It pumps blood, just like pilgrims come in Mecca and Medina and go back to the world. Same thing happens here. Pilgrims come and lead.
It's a beautiful analogy.
People here just are here to serve, and here to serve the pilgrims that come. So.
And there's a community of volunteers living here surrounding the Baha'i Center?
Yeah. There's residents from around the world. A lot of Africans, a lot of Asians, a lot of Americans.
We met French and German and
French,
Seychelles,
absolutely.
Really old
world. Seychelles. I didn't even know where Seychelles was until recently. And it's wonderful. The diversity is enriching, but it's also, you get a sense of interconnectivity, especially at this point. The Baha'i faith is still very young, and the sense that you might know another Baha'i around the world is something very rare. In the future, it might not be like that. It might be so many, perhaps, that it'll feel very strange, I think. Perhaps.
Interesting. Is there a fraternity and community here amongst the volunteers that are living in Israel?
Fraternity?
Is there a sense of
camaraderie?
Exactly.
I mean, in any community, I think that happens. Yeah, and I think the spirit of learning, the spirit of fellowship, is definitely an aspect of here, especially with the sense that you wake up, you go, you serve. It sort of feels like a day-to-day job, but you are reminding yourself that this is the Holy Land. History was made here. The same people that you read as a kid in stories walked on this place, and they talked to people. They talked to officials, government officials, letters were written to kings and queens around the world during the time. It's crazy when you think about it, But
so you have this really like intense spiritual year for introspection, for growth, like the sabbatical away from the crazy world.
Sure, very similar. Sure.
Is that
sure?
I'm also curious about something else. I grew up in a community. I was also like in kind of a religious. My parents were sent as religious missionaries in some sense by an international young religious Jewish denomination.
Okay.
And the sense of being an individual within a community, but in a larger society that was very foreign to me. I had a very strong sense of purpose and mission, being there, being something unique and different and special, being there for a purpose. You're one of maybe 700, 600 probably individuals in a country of 13 million. Is that an isolating experience? Is that an empowering experience? Is that
probably a little bit of both, honestly? Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I think a lot of parents and families abroad and other Baha'is around the world are probably super proud of the people and friends that come to serve here, and we're proud to do so as well. But yeah, it can be sort of that daunting, isolated feeling. Not just that you come to an alienated culture, you don't know the language, you don't know some of the customs.
Yeah.
It's very noisy at nighttime, But even knowing that you're sort of a religious minority in this state, it can be daunting at times. Sure.
When you're studying the Baha'i faith, Baha'i tradition, what does that typically look like for you? What kind of resources do you have? Mentorship? How does one within the tradition study it?
Sure. There's during my lifetime, there's been a consolidation of, if I can say, teaching material, of reflection material that's been germinated by the Baha'i community itself, and been through a lot of re-edits and reiterations, and just kind of making it presentable and affordable, and trying to generate the conversations around such thematic topics as spirituality, life and death, prayer, and things like that. Topics that you wouldn't have in normal day life with people at work. But in the sense that it's not just like there's only one answer and that's the only answer, right? It's more of a generating conversation, right? So though the program itself might be sort of a reading comprehension, where you look at quotes and you read writings and you read questions and write answers, there's a study called the Ruhi Institute, and the amount of themes that they cover is incredible, and the vast collection of volumes of books that are being presented now are truly amazing. I think 13 at least right now. The fourth one being the history of the faith. To just read in prose, in very short prose, of like what happened during the life of Baha'u'llah and the Bab, what happened in the country, and then to just, if you wanted to understand that, just a little reading, writing comprehension, basically.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm getting a sense that a lot of the study and a lot of the matriculation and growth is very self-directed, and there's a real sense of free inquiry, as you've mentioned, where it seems like you're not really forced to believe a certain way, but it's really up to the individual to explore and to think and to find and to. Is that true?
Absolutely. There's a lot of material from the faith that is still untranslated and is still in its original text in Arabic. So a lot of English speakers, of course, they can only study what they have available. And the Baha'i community, spanning around the world, of course, in different cultures, has put focus on such thematic means, such as marriage, such as life and death, to write their understanding through review of what does a Baha'i perspective look like in these kind of forms. This reaches all the way to some of the social structures that we have today, that of like commerce, philanthropy, medicine. We believe that maybe, and I think one of the figures of the faith mentioned that in the future, most of humanity probably will move to a vegetarian diet. It's sustainable, and we're starting to see an awakening within the people themselves, in humanity itself. I'm from Texas, so I love meat. Unfortunately, yeah, I love barbecue.
I have a sneaky question.
Yeah.
When I'm reading about Baha'i and I'm reading about the faith, so much of it seems like the obvious good thing that we should be doing, like the unity of like humanity, like the equality of the genders, like
Yeah.
the world peace, like the
Sure.
abolition of the excesses of wealth and poverty. Like they're all like really like non-brainers for people to say in a positive way.
Right.
If I asked you what are the beliefs in Baha'i that are like the counterintuitive ones, when you tell a modern person, they're like, oh, that sounds like something which I don't know if I would like automatically get behind. What are some of the harder things to sell? Not that you're trying to sell it, of course.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if we really want to get into any of those. Not in this case. Maybe not in this interview.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Tell me this. I'm most fascinated by mysticism
Sure.
and the interplay between philosophy and mysticism.
Okay.
And I was having a chat with some of the girls on the campus about mysticism in Baha'i, and I want to pose the same question to you. Do you think there's an element of mysticism in the Baha'i faith, and if so, what is it?
In the same sense that words have power and have like world reverberating power in that sense, like mysticism of the spirit of.
So mysticism is a tricky word.
Yeah, I know.
And that's definitely one. Maybe just to go from like a world's religion perspective. Let's say in Islam you have Sufis that are like this sort of intensification of religion.
Poetic.
There's a poetic sense.
Yeah.
They're filled with love and they're drunk on God. There's a sense of
Right.
intimacy and union with the divine
Right.
oneness. Do you find a sense of that in Judaism? Let's say you have the Kabbalistic tradition, which is like the people who will meditate on, the metaphysical structure of reality to try to get close to God.
Right.
Amongst the Christians, you have, Meister Eckhart, St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila. Do you think there's an equivalent sort of mystical, either spirit like pervading Baha'i as a whole or within streams within Baha'i?
Yeah, I think entirety actually of the Baha'i faith is enwrapped in this sort of mysticism. Baha'i faith actually has no denominations, so it's actually been kept together because of the only faith that had a will and testament after the passing of the founding figure. But aside from the structure of the faith, yeah, there's a lot to be said on the pervading power of coming together in a sense of reflection and meditation, and of course through effort and through work, seeing that as confirmations within the work that you put in. Not to say that coincidences happen, and they can be fleeting, of course, and some people might take them out to be a meaning or a sign from God. I myself am, for sure seen some, at least put connections with things that are happening around the world, right? But yes, the nature of the texts of the Baha'i are sort of poetic in their own right, really. Even the translations into English are very poetic in their own sense. And they always talk with analogies, reflecting and showing patterns related to, like I said, the human body, the heart, the world center. There's an interconnectedness between the way we see nature and patterns in the universe and that of how humans can sort of relate to themselves and relate to society and interact with each other, right? An analogy, I guess, would be like to understand a manifestation of God or a prophet is to look into a mirror, a stainless mirror that has no blemishes, no dirt, and to see the reflection of the sun. And so to know God is to know God through a reflection, and that the only one that can truly understand God is one that has direct communication with him, that being of a prophet or a manifestation of God.
That process of getting closer to God, which is central to any faith, that sense of wanting to become closer to God, which I think the ultimate would be the prophet or the manifestation of God as it's referred to in Baha'i. In many mystical faith traditions, there's a sense that one needs to either nullify or modify or eradicate or transform the ego in some sense, as the ego is an impediment to reaching God. Is there a similar idea in Baha'i where...
Absolutely, yeah, very similar. The hardest war to wage is the war on self. And a lot of self-sacrifice is needed before one can even take that first step into searching truly for an answer. That's what we have a commentation by the Manifestation on the Sufi poem called the Comforts of the Birds. I don't know if you're familiar with
From
that.
Attar.
Yeah, from Attar. And the commentary was called The Seven Valleys, which has to do with that of first is the valley of search, where someone has to first completely clean out their laundry and make sure that they have only one goal, and one goal is to be open and be wanting to look for truth. And of course the second one being that of, I think, if I remember correctly, love, which is a painful valley because it has to be with an attraction to beauty. When you find that attractive, it's painful to tear yourself away from things that you are already in love with, things that I'm a gamer. I love playing video games, but it's also time consuming. It's addicting. It takes away from a lot of things that I would be doing otherwise. And so for me, it's a very hard step to just take myself away. Not to say complete abstinence, but moderation is key, right? So
to redirect that love.
To redirect that love, exactly. And once you're on this kind of path, you start to be emphatic, drunk on love, as the Sufis call it, right? And there's only one thing, is to throw yourself like a moth into a fire, into a flame, and be consumed by that. So Baha'is believe that in this world that we live in this mortal material world, is that our one true purpose is to know God and to love God. Simple as that. And how we love God is by loving humanity, serving his kindred, serving humanity, and try and deepen our understanding of what is God. Not to say that that people have attained stature of closeness to God. We Baha'is believe that it's kind of unattainable, but to excel towards some sort of perfection is what we're striving for. Right?
So let me ask you the impossible question then. At least from a Baha'i perspective, what is God?
God is an unknowable being of essence, but he's seen everywhere. His proofs are seen everywhere. If someone argues that God doesn't exist, the best thing that you can say is heat doesn't exist without cold first. There is no heat without cold. There's no light without darkness. And in the same sense, you wouldn't understand God or know if there's a God if there wasn't a sense of feeling that there's no God. If you feel, like the story of Job, that everything is hitting at you, that God doesn't exist, that all these calamities are falling upon you, well, maybe there's a reason. Maybe it's not just by chance. Maybe it is by chance. Maybe it's a test. Maybe it's something that strengthens you as an individual. And upon doing so, you are a better person. You come out stronger. You can face harder challenges. And that's God's sort of mercy on us. Because otherwise we wouldn't get strong. We would still be weak. I like to joke with some of the Baha'is here that why is the Baha'i World Center on a mountain? Maybe it's just to strengthen the legs of the youth, put them into action physically.
How many times a day are you?
Every day, yeah. Yeah, I've actually gone from a couch potato to someone who can really run up the mountain.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Since December.
Yeah,
Well
since
done.
December.
Well done. I hope to come back in a year and see you shredded, six pack, just carrying people up the mountain.
Right.
Let me ask a pointed question in regards to God. Is God seen? And I think this is a big sort of litmus test that distinguishes more, let's say, exoteric forms of religion,
Hmm.
with more esoteric, more internal, mystical forms of religion.
Okay.
Is God seen as other and separate than reality, our lives, the world, or is God seen as immanent, present, manifest, united in some sense with the world?
Hmm.
Sort of the transcendence, immanence debate in one way.
Right. No, I would have to say the latter, really. Yeah. Um, Again, you can believe in God. You don't have to believe in God. But if there is a God, God probably doesn't care whether you believe or not. God exists and God is there. Um, that coming from someone who believes in God. Um, but yeah, when you
What?
try to explain the unexplainable,
Yeah.
the best thing to come to is the sense that something's there. The maker who makes a chair, the chair doesn't know of the maker, but the maker knows of the chair. And the chair is there to just serve.
What is the immanence of God mean to Baha'i?
Immanence of God.
The presence of God
Presence of God.
in reality.
It's comforting. I think a lot of scriptures, both Baha'i and otherwise, state that when you're in times of woe, in times of strife and difficulties, that just the sheer remembrance of God can heal and cast away all your worries. That if you call to remembrance God in prayer, of course in full devotion, right? That's the most pure sense of prayer, is just fully forgetting oneself and trying your hardest to, I guess, reach out and speak if you can. That confirmations will come. There might be heavenly angels that come and carry you on their shoulders, They'll come and assist you when you're in times of need. You have to be, of course, pure-hearted, very open-minded, and put in the work.
The phrase that you mentioned before, that the prophet is a manifestation of God. What is that taken to mean, that he's a manifestation of God?
That they embody I think that every manifestation of God that's come before they manifest the qualities of God. They're manifestation of God in this earthly plane. That the human temple that resides here is still very human, is still very mortal. If you were to cut them, they would still bleed. They still have to eat, they still have to drink. But they have inhuman abilities that can conquer anything that a normal human being can. These we've seen in history, in the Bible, in the Quran, as miracles, right? So, yeah, I think that being a manifestation of God, you're manifesting the direct qualities of God.
And what are those qualities that are being manifested?
A sovereignty that emits regardless whether they're present in this day that we live or not. You can have kings and queens that have done nothing for their people, have only thought of themselves, and yet they're forgotten in history. But if you have a king and a queen that give up on themselves, they have a sovereignty that lasts their generation, that lasts a dynasty over many millennia. Manifestations of God, Jesus has had a dynasty way, way after his death. That's the sovereignty that I'm talking about. Yeah.
Is there something about the average normal human, the individual, aspiring to be like the manifestation of God? Is that a possibility even?
I don't know about that. In the Baha'i faith, we have several key figures in the faith. Twin manifestations of God coming at the same time in history. They're never meeting each other, actually. But the son of the latter manifestation of God, Baha'u'llah, his son was named Abdul Baha, which means servant of God, servant, really. He only wanted to be known as Abdul Baha, nothing more, nothing less. My name, my job, who I am, everything I am is Abdul Baha. And he was proclaimed by his father as being a near to perfect human being, as being someone who Baha'is and the rest of the world could aspire to be. There's, I think in Sufism, there's a an analogy of a tree on a hill which you cannot pass. That to pass this hill is to attain the presence of God himself, right? And that those who are just on that cusp, or maybe before, after, are prophets, are manifestations of God. Baha'is believe that we as human beings are striving to climb that hill, but we're never, I don't think, ever going to achieve the tree or past that. It's on a hill, we'll see and strive all we can. So in the Baha'i faith, Abdu'l-Baha was that perfect exemplar to us. Yeah.
But at least meanwhile we can build up our calf muscles and we can
Exactly.
strengthen the heart. I'm curious to know, is this may be a small point, but I think it's maybe worth asking. I've seen in a lot of Baha'i literature and also in the way you speak that God is referred to in the masculine. Is that an intentional choice of language? Is God somehow associated with masculinity? Because I know in other areas there's a lot of emphasis on gender equality.
I believe maybe that's originated more from the time that he lived, perhaps. Gender equality is a massive teaching of the faith. It's integrated into a lot of parts, but in qualities of language in reference to God, maybe it's just the translations that I've been reading. Maybe it's the English translations. It always says he, but anytime it refers to God, it's referring in capital letters.
Yeah.
Not to say that he or she is a he or she, but God in essence is unknowable. So therefore, who's the better judgment? Definitely not.
Right. I'm assuming it does not mean that God has male genitalia.
Right, yeah, of course.
Right. I was reading excuse me for doing this, I was reading the Wikipedia page on Baha'i.
Sure.
And there was a list of, I think it was maybe 13 key elements of faith that had been selected from a text from Shoghi Effendi. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Shoghi Effendi, yeah.
And some of them made very good sense to me, and some of them seemed very bizarre. I was wondering if I could read those 12 and
sure, I'll do my best, yeah.
Okay. These following principles are frequently listed as quick summary of Baha'i teachings. They're derived from transcripts of speeches given by Abdu'l-Baha, which is the son of Baha'u'llah, during his tour of Europe and North America in 1912. The list is not authoritative, and a variety of such lists circulate. So you can tell me if you think this list is bogus. So the first one is unity of God, which is an easy one to understand.
Yeah.
Maybe let me ask you, what does that mean in on one foot, unity of God in?
If Muhammad came and said there's one God and his messenger is Muhammad, it must have been the same God that Jesus was talking about, must have been the same God that Krishna was talking about.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm gonna do like a lightning round here. That was very good. Unity of religion.
Unity of religion. That we're speaking the same topics. We're trying to learn the same themes, but we're just speaking different languages. That's it. We come from different planes of time in history, but the tenets themselves are so interconnected and so similar that we just need to come together, and once we have a better understanding of each other and what those tenets are, we realize we're on the same page.
I'm with it. I'm with it. Well, we're all about it. Unity of humanity.
Unity of humanity. Our DNA is like 99.9% close to a banana. So if someone from one part of the world is black and one person's white and one person's Asian and one person's Eskimo, I don't know, you're all human.
Yeah.
There's no difference in... Baha'is believe that the human is born noble. When you're born as a baby,
beautiful.
You're born noble.
Wow.
The only tarnish that comes is from living here amongst crazy people.
I love the line that the human is born noble. That's really beautiful. Do bananas have a special place in the Baha'i faith?
Probably.
This is something we mentioned before, equality between men and women. Let me ask you, instead of speaking theoretically about it as we have been, tell me practically the first example that comes to mind of equality.
If parents were to put a child into school, the emphasis should be put on the daughter, not the son.
Doesn't sound like equality to me.
Well, this is why, because the mother is the first educator of the child. it's always been so that the son is always put into school first. This is where the evolution comes into play, is that if we're trying to better humanity on an evolutionary point, education of the children has to be one of the first places to start. And to change that, you have to emphasize on the social structure. So though it may seem that there's a lot of emphasis with the women, it's actually just balancing out what many years of kind of history has done.
I was joking when I said this.
No, of course, that's fine.
That seems really radical. I mean, to place a premium on women's education before even, you know, a male child's education seems like a radical move.
Sure.
And I'm sure as well it had a lot of resistance.
Of course. Yeah, at the time, sure.
Elimination of all forms of prejudice. That's pretty self-explanatory. I think anyone can get behind that one.
We're living in history right now with that conversation being at the forefront.
Yes. Is there an active Baha'i voice in the contemporary discussion of racism?
I think so. Yeah, the Baha'is are trying to actively engage in social action, whether that is elevating conversation, interfaith dialogues, being a contributor in the social discussion. When it comes to that, you have to bring religion into it, not religion itself, but the concepts of spirituality, because at its core, these illnesses that humanity is going through are on a spiritual level rather than just a social level. The social level is a consequence thereafter.
Nice, that's very cool. I mean, I think even the fact that we're sitting here, me and you, I'm a Hasidic Jew from Sydney, Australia, you're a Baha'i from Austin, Texas, and being able to like connect so smoothly, I think this itself is like very Baha'i in Baha'i-esque. World peace. Oh, okay. The next couple ones, I think they get more fascinating as they go along.
Okay.
So far, these all seems like general, like well accepted tenets.
Sure. Yeah.
So like a thumbs up to Wikipedia. They did good. World peace and a new world order. What does that mean?
World peace and new world order.
Is that a phrase that's used in behind a new world order?
There's somewhere written that the old world order as we know it will be rolled up as like a rug, and a new one will be spread out in its wake. I'm definitely sure we're not there yet. I'm pretty sure what it's referring to is a golden age of humanity, where it's like a maturing aspect of putting away our differences and trying to come together at a table of consultation rather than at a table of competition. How we get there, inshallah, we shall see, but it's going to be harder before it gets better.
Oof. Do you have any sense of where we are in the process?
No, not at all.
No sense.
Not at all. Since the inception of the faith to its leading figures, to the Universal House of Justice, which is now the governing body of the Baha'is around the world. There's a myriad of projects and just advances that need to be undertaken, both within the Baha'i community and outside. Things have to sort of align on a spiritual level as well as a material level, as well as a social level, for there to be peace on earth, right? Yeah. Every religion is striving towards peace on earth. But history shows that when people do things in the name of God, it kind of hurts more than it does good. So Baha'is will undertake a grassroots effort of building communities, strengthening communities, whether that is on a devotional level, on a social level, on an economical level. They'll do their part for sure, and I'm pretty sure everyone else will do their part as well.
I like that approach of trying to change things really from the bottom up instead of trying to come in top down, because that just hasn't worked so well historically.
No. People usually are afraid to lose their influence or their power, and perhaps in the future people will just willingly give up their power because they see the better horizon at the end. I don't know. That was
maybe. Hopefully.
I butchered that one. That was
no. I mean,
no.
I think that touches on the key issue where like the solution is a pretty simple one. Like if we put the concerns of each other before our own concerns and before our own ego and pride, then the path to world peace is not so difficult. And unfortunately, but like if people will be willing to make that transition, which is why it's really an internal work. It's a spiritual work.
Right.
The harmony of religion and science. That's an interesting one.
Harmony what?
Harmony of religion and science.
Oh, harmony of religion and science. Oh, this is a fun one.
Because I mean, many religions will have a fundamentalist view towards science and will just reject it.
Sure.
How does that work in the Baha'i faith?
Well, if we're talking about equality of humanity, and that science has sort of proven that fact with a banana, you can sort of see where I'm going with this, right? The more with science, harmony and science doesn't mean that they agree. Harmony means that they work together. One may translate the world of material on a very materialistic way, right? The other one is more of a philosophic way, an invisible way. But when you have faith in something, the other might appear. So Einstein had a sense of faith from growing up, and he was motivated by that faith, and look where that took him. The amount of science that was germinated from that revolutionized the way we think and the way we do things. I think they're still even discovering new atoms today, and that only comes with a sense of faith that it exists out there somewhere. If you just analyze what you have almost pure fanaticism. If you have, or just pure materialism. If you have just religion without science, you might just have pure fanaticism.
I love that. I love the way you phrased it. That harmony does not mean that they always agree with one another, but that they can work together for a greater goal.
Exactly.
That's really, really beautiful. Inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah.
This is something we've discussed already. The independent investigation of truth.
Yes.
Which I think as well sets the Baha'i faith, separate from other faiths, where usually the emphasis on independent investigation of truth is not a value. Even I don't know if it's even encouraged as much in certain religious traditions. A bit of a tongue-in-cheek question before we get to this. Do you know Rainn Wilson?
Personally, yeah.
Can we get his mobile number after this interview?
I wish.
Rainn actually is someone who really turned me on to Baha'i.
Hey, okay.
And I've listened to him do interviews talking about his faith.
On YouTube, yeah.
On YouTube, and his work that he does through...
Soul Pancake?
Soul Pancake,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the way that he's always spoke about religion, about God, always seemed so beautiful and just in line with a lot of my own thinking.
Yeah.
So he's doing a great job. So when you speak to Rainn next, tell him that he's doing a great job being
Sure, I will, definitely.
I love your calmness and your you have a really nice way of speaking, presenting.
Thank you.
You must have had some time being a storyteller or a film.
Just practice, I guess. Yeah. That's what it goes hand in hand with deepening. You learn, you connect, you can reiterate better. You can actually delve into the topics themselves.
You're not just sort of just rehashing or repeating.
Exactly.
You actually be able to share something real.
I'm trying to connect the dots as best as possible.
Do you are you encouraged to go and study secular philosophy?
The which one?
Secular philosophy, non-religious philosophy.
Yeah. I went. I don't know if it's encouraged per se, but I definitely think it should be just if you wanted to know why a lot of secular people come with these sort of questions, how do you communicate? How do you bridge the gap rather than trying to throw a rock and hoping that they catch it,
Yes. That's a great analogy. That's really great. I feel like a lot of religion unfortunately is doing that. So the next thing on the list is universal compulsory education. What does that mean in Baha'i?
Compulsory education. The world needs a diversity of professions, skill sets. Not everyone can be a bricklayer. Not everyone can be a microchip maker. And compulsory education allows you to sort of see the way the world works from an outside perspective and put it all in the palm of your hand and be able to analyze it, digest it, and make decisions for yourself. You're not influenced by someone else's opinion. You can think for yourself. If someone told you that, in a crazy sense, Middle East, go kill yourself, you'll go to heaven. you'll go kill other people, you also go to heaven. But you think of how the world actually works after being educated in the way there's goodness in people, there's righteousness in a bunch of people. Are you going to think for yourself or let someone else dictate how you think? Are you going to live for yourself or live by someone else's means? Where does your story, the moment you start doing what someone else is telling you to do, your story is ended. You're living someone else's story.
I'm really curious on that point, and also on the, I could have asked this on the previous point as well. What's the retention rate within the Baha'i community?
Retention?
In terms of people that are born into the faith, staying in the faith, with such a strong emphasis
I
on.
have no idea.
What, amongst your own friends, how many of them have stayed behind? How many of them have left?
Most of them are Baha'i still. Yeah. Again, I think if youth are left to their own devices, as I definitely have seen, they get enthralled with materialism. They get enthralled with the social standard that is being sold to them, and they get lost in it, and their lives tend to plummet from there. Those who who've stayed in the faith, not everyone has deepened themselves as much as others, but they're still living decent lives and living. I know people who say, yeah, I'm a Baha'i, but they don't attend Baha'i gatherings. They don't go anywhere. That's fine.
Can one be a Baha'i culturally, just like loosely like that, without actually practicing?
Can you call yourself a Baha'i and still not live to a standard that you're called to enact?
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense. I think if you called yourself a Baha'i,
it means something.
It means something.
Yeah.
It means you believe in this, and you'll do your best to uphold that standard. You're trying to better yourself and better the standard around you, and help everyone else up.
That's really nice. There's 3 more here in the list. We're right at the bottom. Obedience to government and non-involvement in partisan politics.
Baha'is, this might go into too detail. I don't know if you really want to include this, but I'll share that Baha'is are encouraged not to run for government office, because a lot of partisan politics today is contention and fighting against one another. It's divisive. And if that makes its way into even the Baha'i community, it'll do its damage. Yeah. And we're trying to not have that, obviously.
Is there a way to be involved in politics that's non-partisan?
Yeah. Every Baha'i is asked to be a servant to their country, to uphold the rules. And voting is a... what did they say? Voting is a... voting's not a right. Voting's not a right. It's a privilege, and it's a duty to do that, because it's a democratic process, right? And it's the people's. I mean, that's politics, right? It's the people's word. Working its way up the ladder to then have its influence over the rest.
The Baha'is told how to vote, or is it each person on their own?
I mean, I think it's up to each person on their own. But of course, they should do their own investigation of truth of who they're voting for, and not just follow, obviously, just the loudest person in the room.
So this next one's a real no-brainer. I think prohibition of slavery, which I think we can all get behind. Although I'm sure when this was originally formulated, it was radical at the time.
Of course.
And this next one is interesting, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. Is the elimination of the extremes of wealth and poverty. What does that mean for Baha'i? Because that seems like quite a strong statement.
It is a very strong statement. I'm still not familiar with the whole economic, financial world myself, but the extremes of wealth and poverty that we're seeing are daunting beyond belief. If one person's loss is another person's gain, but if they gain and do not distribute that wealth and do not share that wealth, then these two standards remain the same. And it's not uplifting to the entire community. One person in a neighborhood has a castle and the rest are in huts, right? We see these divides, these borders happening all around the world. Pretty sure it's like in in India somewhere, where you have a railroad going down the middle, and on one side you have shanty town, on the other side you have suburban neighborhood. This is an extreme wealth and poverty.
Yeah.
Of course, we can't be super radical and just cause a riot and throw the entire way the world is under the rug in a fortnight.
So you're not anarchists.
Yeah, no, we're not anarchists. No, for sure. And that goes in tandem with rolling out a new world order. We're not gonna, destroy the way the world is. It has to naturally and organically evolve. It's going to take time.
But there's a deep recognition that the way the world is broken, and there needs to be work done by us to fix it.
Yes.
It's a very beautiful and also a very Jewish idea. The idea of that we live in a fractured reality, and it's our work to repair the world. Yeah. No, there's definitely a lot of commonality. I want to maybe end with one final question, because you've been so generous with your time, and I really, really appreciate it. Which is, again, a personal question.
Sure.
I'm curious to know, and if you don't want to, if you would rather remain silent on this, I would fully understand. I'm very curious to know about the spiritual experiences of people in different faith traditions, both in how they are similar to people in other faith traditions that they would have never met and never spoken with, but in their deepest, most intimate religious experiences, the deep commonality, and also the flavors of difference within that. So if you'd be willing to share your own experience or reflection on experience
with other faith traditions.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I still think humanity's going through a teenage change, so it's very rebellious.
Explain. I heard that said before as well.
Really?
Explain what you mean by that. There's sort of this view of humanity as a human.
Yeah, I mean, the world is so interconnected right now with technology. The way that we have the internet, you can call someone on the other side of the planet. These are physical, geographical borders that were boundaries, walls.
That are just abolished.
And gone like that.
Yeah.
So we're having a hot pot of all these different flavors of ideas, commonalities, opinions, and a lot of it is clashing. But that's also based on we were so isolated before. So we're fighting that past that was so isolated, where we had still tribes, but on a much bigger scale, right? So you had nations who colonized the world in their own image. And by doing so, they harmed history in the making. They segregated people, enslaved people, and those cities now being freed are now still segregated and suffering based on that infrastructure and that development. If the people themselves were to develop naturally from their own accord, the unity of the people might have been better. The access to its own wealth could have been better managed and handled. Likewise, when we're talking about trying to deepen our connection and understanding of faith and what does it mean to be with God, God came with messengers from different places of the world. In Asia, you had Buddha and Krishna. In the Middle East, you had the Bab, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah. Jesus was a little bit more north. I'm pretty sure nobody was in the U.S., though a lot of Native Americans have a lot of spirituality connections to a lot of other religions.
But the sense that
the fighting, going back to that topic of fighting this teenager sense, we're fighting a past. We're fighting that a kid doesn't want to grow up. The kid wants to stay a kid and doesn't want to mature towards actually, if we want world peace, we have to mature in certain aspects of our life.
I really love this analogy of humanity as a whole as one human life that's progressing, right? Where you have sort of childhood moments moving through, and now you say that within the Baha'i perspective.
If you had to sum up the Baha'i faith in one word, I think they used to use this all the time back in like the 80s, 90s. It would be unity. Unity of humanity. Bringing everyone, I think, in Jewish traditions, the Tanakh is not the Tanakh, a place where God is mentioned. What is the word for that?
The Mishkan,
Mishkan?
the tabernacle.
Tabernacle. That humanity and religion is trying to bring all of humanity under one tabernacle. And that's what the Baha'is are striving for as well.
That's really cool, because when we were down by the Baha'i Gardens earlier, I was talking to some of the Baha'i young girls that were there in service as well. And when I mentioned the name of our project, the channel, they got very excited, because the project is Seekers of Unity.
Yeah.
And they like right away, like, oh, you nailed it. You got it. So that's very cool. And yeah, I'm curious to know, do you, in your own spiritual practice, in your own practice of prayer or meditation, I'm curious to know firstly what that looks like in a formal sense, like what does it look like externally? And if you can share, what state does that bring you to internally?
So in the religion of the Baha'is, there's no clergy to begin with. There's also no rituals.
No clergy, no rituals.
No rituals, no clergy.
Wow.
So again, we like to joke around at saying that the religion is very hard because it's on an individual basis.
Are there festivals? Are there calendar events?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Prayer, for example, in the concealment of your own room, where you calling to mind, reflecting on your day, reflecting on your life, and then praying wholeheartedly on bettering yourself and for the guidance of others, I think that's the highest form of prayer that you can really do. To then have a devotional atmosphere where, in the sense of a congregation, you have a bunch of Baha'is in the same room. At the same time, you want everyone to have that same sort of feeling. The atmosphere should be one of joy, of thoughtfulness, of reverence. And yeah.
Is there, in terms of just the form of it, is there a liturgy? Is there hymns? Is it silent prayer? What does it look like?
I think in the way culturally it's developed is perhaps just reading some writings from some of the texts, which can be from anywhere in the Baha'i faith, really. So it could be from the Seven Valleys as a commentating. It could be hidden words from Baha'u'llah. It could be gleanings. It could be from the talks of Abdul Baha in Paris. It could be from a talk that Shoghi Effendi once gave. Or the Bab, a prayer that maybe he revealed, as they used to call them, tablets, right? Followed by maybe some music, followed by some refreshments afterwards.
Yes.
Very simple.
Do people just come for the refreshment sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Those are like the Jewish Baha'is.
Yeah, totally.
There's one Baha'i book, which I love the title. It's called Breakers of the Dawn, or Dawn Breakers.
Dawn Breakers.
What a great title.
Yeah.
What a great title.
Written at the time and during the lifetime of Baha'u'llah. We refer to it as the heroic era of the Baha'i faith. Because a lot of martyrdoms happened during that time. But the story itself is of epic proportion, and there's so many historic events of the Baha'i faith that happened during that time. Of course, you can find translations in more simpler, novelistic terms, easier reads. You don't have to deal with the very hard, long Arabic names.
They are tough.
They're tough.
In your experience of prayer,
Sure.
Has it brought you to an experience of prayer? Has there been, or what has been sort of the internal, if you can describe, it's very hard to put words to these things, but some sort of internal religious experience, or, yeah.
In the Baha'i faith, there are 3 obligatory prayers that we're asked to try and strive for to read during our days.
Nice. We got 3 as well.
Of course. Yeah. So we have a short obligatory prayer, which can be read at noon. We have a long obligatory prayer that can be read once in 24 hours, whenever you feel like it. And we have a middle length obligatory prayer, which I believe should be read 3 times a day. I believe.
I like the flexibility of this. I like that you can do it.
I've actually done the long obligatory prayer maybe thrice, like 3 times.
Ever. I'm gonna have to chat with your superiors after this.
And
in any language you can do it?
Sure, yeah. And I think it's translated mostly in different languages, and the prayers themselves are basically calling to mind that we are trying our hardest to recognize God and are humbling ourselves in submission to the greatness of God, that everything around us is a sign, and therefore we are in awe of its superiority, and we'll call to being. I can show you it afterwards if you'd like.
Yeah. I'd love to see that.
Sure.
I don't know why this came to my head, for a bit of levity. Is there anything as a Baha'i that you can't do that you would really love to do? Like, I'd love to get a tattoo, but in Judaism it's just not a thing.
So remember social laws.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure like shaving of the head was a social law that is like only for certain places of the world. And I think it is still. Though I think in America, I know several Baha'is who were bald. And whether or not they shaved their head, I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure they did.
Oh.
So I don't think it was law breaking in that sense. But again, knowing and understanding that the human temple is something to be to take care of, to embellish and all that, you be careful what you do, really. I don't know how else to really explain it.
You're telling me that you'd love to be bald if you could. Is that what you're saying?
I haven't cut my hair in 5-6 months of quarantine, so this is the longest I've had it without a haircut for a long time.
It's looking very good.
Thank you. No sleep, no drinking, no smoking.
No alcohol.
Things that I don't really care about.
What about? Let me ask you. What about for men, women, and women, men before marriage? Is that a possibility, or is that off the charts?
Adultery? No,
like premarital relationships.
That I think that's a no-no. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a no-no. I think a lot of religions actually say that's a no-no.
Yeah. And marriage within Baha'i, you don't only have to marry Baha'is. You can marry anyone. Is that correct?
Yes, but it just becomes more difficult, of course. Especially the Baha'is being very young, and most people just not have hearing of it.
Yeah.
You know, so it becomes a complication in relationships.
To find someone who is Baha'i, you're saying?
To find someone who's not a Baha'i.
It becomes difficult to find someone who's not Baha'i?
Right. Well, no. To
build a relationship.
Build a relationship, yeah. Right. Because religion is a big aspect in both partners' lives. And you're not just marrying the individual, you're marrying the family.
Yeah.
And all that comes with it.
So you see yourself marrying a Baha'i?
I think at this point in time, I do see myself marrying a Baha'i. Though I've been infatuated with many non-Baha'is as well. So.
Has that been hard for you?
No, not really. No. I think it's just hard at this point. I know a lot of people who have married non-Baha'is and they're doing fine. They're absolutely doing fine.
Well, we know some very nice Baha'i girls from today. We'll see if we can make any.
Cool.
We call it a shidduch in the Hasidic world, where it's like you blind date people.
Oh, blind date people. Yeah. Okay, cool.
And then they're married like 2 days later.
What?
Yeah. This is the very final question. Thank you so much for your absolute generosity of time and spirit. It's been really a real pleasure talking and getting to know you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we've been friends for a long time. We really just met today. No one on the camera is going to believe it. The Seekers of Unity audience, which is an international audience as the internet is today, is really, it's everyone. There's atheists and agnostics and Jews and Muslims and Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and probably more things than I can identify. You, coming from a faith which has so much space and inclusivity for so many traditions and really believes this unity of religions, what is the one message you would give to all of those people that are potentially listening to this conversation as a final message?
So much pressure. Wow. I can only reference a quote that comes to mind. Strive that your actions may day by day be made into beautiful prayers. Work is worship, ultimately. Everyone is on a path searching for the truth, and it doesn't matter which route up the mountain you take. So keep doing what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Can I give you a hug?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That was honestly so fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure meeting you guys. Enjoy your stay in Haifa.
Thank you so much for your time.
And keep in touch. I love this stuff.
Yes.
Do you ever want to like work and join? Because I do a lot of editing and filmmaking and stuff.
Oh,
like
that would be so cool.
Work in tandem.
Yeah, I would actually love to send you like a draft of the work and get your ideas on it.
Please, I would love that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day, guys.
Take care.
Bye.